Welcome to another Abley Digital Engineering Fireside. Today we have myself, Gavin, Hamish, and Chris, and we're going to be talking about how we were introduced to FME and some of the stories behind that, as well as maybe some tips and tricks for other learners out there. So today we'll start with Chris, get some stories from his. So where did you learn FME, or who did you learn it from?
Well, it was first shown FME by Todd, who's normally here, at the company called Skirt, which is a Stronger Christchurch infrastructure rebuild team. That was about 2015. So it was a big part of kind of their environment, and I was kind of seconded to help out there. So Todd had kind of like shown it to the GIS team there as like, yeah, this is what we use and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until 2016 with the Kaikoura earthquake that I actually kind of really had the kind of opportunity or the need to use FME. So I was flown up to work in civil defence after the earthquake there, and the laptop I had brought with me from council didn't work, didn't have the licensing, I couldn't actually do anything, and so in the kind of like scramble for what am I going to do, John Arnrich at Locus was able to provide a free license for FME for kind of the week or so that I was up there, and my first real use was like kind of emergency. We have all these building inspectors and Red Cross out kind of visiting the district, and they were kind of bringing in data at the end of every day for where they had visited, and so it was to kind of match that up with the council's rating database and kind of to provide for planning and intel for the report the next day. Where have they visited, what's the progress, and where are they going to be going next, sort of thing.
It's really interesting, because I would have thought that you learnt and used FME really heavily in Skirt.
Yeah, me too.
Based on the stories I've heard about some of the stuff that FME was used for in Skirt, but you're saying that you actually learnt it towards the end of your time at Skirt.
Yeah, it was after. After Skirt. So Skirt used FME quite heavily, but all of the use was just through essentially the quick translator. It was like pre-set up workflows that Todd and
did one job
had built.
Used.
Yeah, and so you had like your kind of production processes that you kind of run through these workspaces, but I never went in and edited or built any of my own.
Mm-hmm.
So you started off as an end user basically,
yes,
rather than a developer, and then you got exposed to some of the more intricacies of it.
Yes. So they had built several kind of desktop workspaces that you kind of used as kind of your main kind of production process.
Yeah. So were you working overnight then, when you were applying those addresses and whatnot? Because I would imagine the formats came in and data was a little bit.
Initially we weren't up to date in terms of like data came in that day and we had a report the next day. So it took a bit of kind of, I guess, development to get to the point where we could actually run the process and have the result.
Yeah.
So it was also kind of my first use of getting data from an Esri ArcGIS feature service from AGOL, which is how the search and rescue teams were capturing the data.
Nice.
So also figuring that out, how does FME connect with this thing to get the data into?
Yeah. Which, of course, as we know, FME is a great tool to do all that interoperability stuff.
5 years later, or whatever it is now. Yeah. Nice. Yourself, Hamish?
Yeah, so, and there's going to be a recurring theme between me and Chris. Ultimately, Todd was one of the key introducers of me to FME. But I remember quite vividly the first time. So my background is generally GIS. So and the Esri suite. So I started using a lot of Model Builder, and I used Model Builder quite extensively for probably about a year. And then I can't remember the exact problem that I was trying to solve, but I thought let's try the interoperability tool within ArcGIS, which, as some of you might know, is essentially FME. So that was my first time using it, and I'll be honest, I didn't really like it. I thought, why would I use this tool when I could just use Model Builder? Model Builder, it does everything I need. It works, and what I later realised was that I was treating FME and Model Builder the same.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know, Model Builder, it looks very similar to FME. It's a flow of data spatial operations basically. But the way it works on the entire data set at once rather than feature by feature. So I was treating FME like it was, if I was doing a calculate field in Model Builder, I was doing a calculate field across every single row in a table. Whereas, as we know in FME, it actually does it feature by feature, row by row. And that I didn't quite grasp that difference to begin with. And then I sort of put it to the side and thought, what is this tool? I'll just keep using my Model Builder. And then Todd joined Abley, and by that point he was pretty experienced in FME, and he brought that tool along and started introducing all of us. And with the ability of having someone like Todd, he's going to love watching this because we're saying really good things about him. Having someone like Todd there to be able to teach me and guide me through a lot of things, I actually started to understand, and then one day it just clicked, and I realised, right, this is how this tool operates, and this is how I can flow data through it. And then that was really, really history. And occasionally I've had to go look at Model Builder previously or again, and I'm like, why would anyone use this? This just seems so archaic and so backwards. And then the rest is really history. And all of that was probably, that would have been almost a very similar time to Chris when you first started using FME quite a bit back in 2015 odd. So that was right back at the start of my career and my time here at Abley.
Nice.
Yeah, whereas I never had that Model Builder background.
Yeah.
So back at council, so we had GeoMedia was our desktop GIS, which, yes, its main quirk or selling point is its live queries, where you build queries on top of the data, but any change at any point, it kind of instantly kind of travels through the chain of queries, which is kind of mind-blowing to anyone from an easier background. But kind of it's like you build queries in that same kind of way, where it's like you HTTP queries, maybe filter some stuff, maybe join some other stuff, and it all just kind of joins together kind of live in your view.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. So one of our colleagues in the development side, he's got quite a deep background of it's not GeoWorks, not GeoMedia, another platform. I can't quite recall what it is now. But he said, this looks very similar to the sort of development and the tools that he used to build. And he hasn't been pestering me, but he's indicated many times, hey, I'd love to learn FME because it looks so similar to tools that I have built and developed previously.
Nice.
And what about you, Gavin?
For me, I did not learn from Todd Davis. No,
so that's why you're better than us.
I wouldn't say that by any stretch of the imagination. Different. It's not just the accent. So I came from, originally I was a digital cartography background, proprietary software. I worked at Garmin, and they didn't use Esri or anything of the sort. They built their own, I wouldn't even call it GIS, their own cartography tools in-house, and then they had the engineers to support it. So the basis of my knowledge was really on just the concepts of cartography, and it was a SQL-based platform, I guess you could call it. So there's queries were built kind of SQL, but you'd still have a dialog box where you could do it similar to using Esri tools. So I worked there for 10 years almost. And from that point, I went to an engineering firm, and that's where FME was kind of set in front of me, handed a laptop, and they were converting the program management software that it was an application, web-based application, and they were converting it from the KML plugin to Cesium. And so I was handed a whole bunch of KML and a whole bunch of shapefiles and just some data and FME and a laptop, and said, we need this to go into this. And granted, we have a team of 5-6 people, so it wasn't just I was on my own. But that's really where I learned FME, was converting files. And then adding in data sets and writing them out to GeoJSON. KML was still supported in Cesium. Actually, Cesium is a XML-based display model. if you want to call it that, file format that you can show in there, but it shows everything else. So that's really where I learned. The individuals that helped me out were developers mostly, which was interesting because
like software
developers, yeah. And I was originally a GIS-y cartography type person, and so that's where I kind of was given some introduction to software and just JSON and JavaScript and everything else that's involved with that, right? So it was a bit of a crash course in a lot of ways.
From saying that, I think probably all of us had a bit of a crash course at some point.
Yeah.
We just opened it up and
and
tried it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is actually really interesting if we transition our conversation slightly to things that you learn initially, habits, good habits, bad habits. They all are developed in that first introduction to those things. So if you're introduced by people who are quite experienced and have good habits, then obviously you're going to develop good habits. But some other bad habits come out of nowhere. So, for example, I'll use myself as an example because nobody's perfect. Reading in data and just, I've got a file geodatabase here. I'm going to read it in. And then you have all your features. Every feature class is coming down the line. And it's like, it's cool. Like, I got all the data in my workspace, and I'll just run my little connection here off into an attribute creator and do what I need to do with it. And so I think that those are some of the things that if you're starting out with people who are experienced and just have good habits, it's really beneficial. So maybe we could talk through a few of the different things that we learned over the course of those first few months.
Yeah.
As I spoke to readers, which we've discussed some of these things in the past.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
Readers back then were still just readers. They didn't have the feature reader. Dynamic reading didn't even exist, I don't think. Or if it did, you were reading in generic file types and doing stuff with the data that way. So dynamic reading and dynamic workspaces is probably one of the biggest things that I learned over time, whether it was through my own effort or through introduction from other people. Transitioning a mindset from reading in your data to dynamically creating data workspaces to read data.
I'm going to think back again to sort of a parallel or a comparison between Model Builder and FME. It's that, so Model Builder, if you do a create field or a calculate field, you create a new feature class with that appended field or that new value in it. So you've got your original data set, then you run it through that tool, and then you get another data set, and then you run it through another tool, you get another data set, and on and on and on. So you can have within your workflow tens of intermediary data sets, which in some cases for auditing purposes is fine, but if you're starting to build lots of big data flows, it gets pretty overwhelming. And there are even some tools that when you pass it through, it doesn't create a new feature class or a new shapefile or whatever. It overwrites your input value. So you had to be really careful about in Model Builder how you did some of that. So often you'd start off, your first tool would be like a feature class to feature class, which is essentially a copy. So you create a copy of it, so you're not going to overwrite your original stuff. Whereas in FME, as we all know, that generally there's a few exceptions, your data isn't overwritten, isn't changed until you put it out through a writer or a feature writer.
Or executor or something.
Or an executor or an SQL executor, something like that. And that's something when I've been teaching a few people FME, they've been like, but I don't want to, let me copy my data because I don't want to
lose it.
I don't want to lose it, or I don't want to make this change. But when you tell them, actually that's fine, you're not making any changes to your raw source data, and you're only writing stuff out to your disk, outside of that memory, that FME space. When you've got a writer, they suddenly think, oh wow, so I can actually start playing and start experimenting and trying different things out without risking my data. And then of course that's even more improved with nowadays with the likes of featurecation.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And like similar to that would be just the mindset of how to develop in FME, and the sampler is by far the tool that, like, I didn't realize it until, I'll be honest, it could have been a year that I was using FME before I realized, oh, if I just slap a sampler in here, I don't have to pass.
You're not waiting for 100,000 features to run through, only to find that, oh, you've got an error here, you need to run it all through.
You just limit it to 10, and yes, it's only a subset, but 10's a hell of a lot faster than 100,000.
But it's like, just to think back and to know that that's how I was just... And I feel bad for like my manager. Like, the person had no idea that Gavin's sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes waiting for.
But sometimes we like that. It means we can have a break when
you need a coffee.
Yeah, it's like that old cartoon that you sometimes see. Two developers having like a sword fight. And like the manager comes in. What are you doing? Oh, my code's compiling. It could be the same. We're sitting there on checking the news. What are you doing? I'll just wait for me the workbench to run.
So I think that those are kind of some of the things that get lost if you don't have like somebody next to you who's been around the block for a while.
And to finish this off, if we could give someone new to FME who's never touched it one piece of advice, what would it be? And on the spot here, so Chris, I've never used FME before. What advice would you give me?
Understand feature caching. So the main thing which I like to change or tell people to change if they're new to FME is I change the toolbar and put the button up the front to say enable feature caching on or off, so you can control that, because often people will just turn it on once and then forget they've got it on and then complain while there's everything they're running takes twice as long or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Learn feature caching.
You get them?
Mine would say use the forum. I would say use the forums knowledge base. I know that's a kind of a scapegoat of an answer, but
that was going to be my answer.
Oh, was it? I mean, there's so much knowledge out there that you really, let me put it this way. If something's taking you more than 20 or 30 minutes to maybe wrap your brain around, there's probably somebody who's been down that track.
Somebody said it before.
Yeah. And so the forums are a great way of using that. Another place, YouTube, guys. I would just YouTube Abley Digital Engineering FME, and you'll be like right there.
Yeah, great shameless plug. Well, seeing that Gavin stole mine, probably mine would be just give it a go. Like as I mentioned, you can't change your data unless you put a writer in. So, what harm is there in trying something?
Yeah.
Like I've said to other colleagues before who have started using it, and they're like, I want to do more FME, like how can I do it? I don't know how to do it. I'm like, if you know how to do something in model builder or Python, cool. You know the logic steps you need to go through. Just go try it in FME.
Yeah.
Just give it a go. What's the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen is you're going to learn a new tool. I don't really think that's a bad thing at all.
It's sometimes intimidating, when folks walk around and they see a bunch of boxes or a big plate of spaghetti on your canvas going on if you haven't turned it into straight lines yet. And I think people sometimes get intimidated by that, and so I can understand where there might be a little bit of intimidation.
Don't be intimidated.
No.
A workbench can be as complex or as simple as you make it.
Yep. And then once you do that first one, hop on to the Academy, which is also something that's relatively new. And even myself, I had the opportunity. I was very fortunate to be able to kick the tires on it when they were starting to roll it out. And it's really good. It's really good for learners. I mean, it walks you through. You learn things. You're using different feature sets and data types. And they did a great job of rolling that out. So if you're wanting to learn FME, like
the Academy, the forums,
the resources are available, and it makes it quite easy.
And reach out to your resellers as well, because I know often they'll be doing webinars and trainings, and there's lots of resources out there.
Yep.
So thanks for watching. It was a pretty good chat today. We'll catch you again soon with another Fireside. I'm Chris, this is Gavin, and Hamish from Abley.